Please know that we're happy to have Lauren Thor here this evening from Oakland, California, and she's returning to show us another postcard topic that she collects, World War One. She delighted us several months ago with a great presentation on bicycle cards from her collection. Please join me in welcoming Lauren Thor for her presentation, World War One Postcards and a Scrap of Paper. Lauren?
Thank you, Hal. Tonight, my program is on postcards from the First World War. And of course, that's obviously a really huge topic. A lot of postcards were produced. But I'm going to be talking a little bit about how the war affected postcards and how postcards affected the war. And I'll be sharing some postcards that I collect that are of interest to me. And also, I will be talking about a phrase that was immortalized in postcards. And that phrase is a little scrap of paper. And that was uttered by a German chancellor in reference to the treaty that was supposed to guarantee the neutrality of Belgium. And so the popularity of the postcard that was starting to wane by 1913. And many publishers, of course, they designed their cards in America, but they had them printed in Germany. And the German producers had superior printing and lithography, and that's why they had them printed over there. So a couple of tariffs were created to kind of counter this and have people buying postcards in and having them get produced here in America. But the tariffs wreaked havoc on the American postcard industry. And actually, the American postcard, it never rose to the quality of the German postcard. And so the public was starting to lose interest. And so this postcard here, I'm not sure of the date, but it does show a postcard depot. So postcards obviously had been very popular at a time, and we do see some soldiers there at this depot. So anyway, the First World War, it comes along, and that gave the postcard a new and vital life, right when it was starting to wane. From 1914 to 1918, Europe was crowded with soldiers, and they were far away from home, and they sent and received thousands of postcards. It was a time when the postcard industry actually reached a new zenith. And this postcard obviously is showing a little army post office, and you're seeing a lot of sacks of mail there. And so for millions of soldiers, this postcard, it was a lifeline to home, and it was easy and an inexpensive way to stay in touch with loved ones. And so the the postcard producers, they jumped on this opportunity, and they couldn't create enough postcards to meet the demand. And so a lot of them, they were very overly sentimental with little poems. It was to, my absent husband, my dear son. They evoked a lot of symbolism that had been used in the past, of using flowers that represented emotions, hawthorn for hope, lilies of the valley for return of happiness. So you see a lot of these very sentimental postcards, but the war made letter writing, very difficult, and postcards with these pre-printed sentiments, they met the need for brevity and haste, and so these cards flourished both for the soldiers sending them and then the family sending them to the soldiers. And also for the soldier, you have to bear in mind that some of them might have had limited literacy, and then their postcards were or their letters and postcards were censored. They had to be read by somebody probably in their regiment, somebody that they knew, an officer. And so, if they got overly sentimental or overly personal, it could be kind of embarrassing for them. So they would let the postcard, pre-printed postcard, um, express that sentiment for them. And so in the British Field Service postcard that was produced for British soldiers, and the cards and postage were free as a way of encouraging the soldiers to write home. to boost morale, because we know that, wars are won or lost based on the troop morale. And so these images are from the British Postal Museum archive. And so obviously, if intercepted letters or postcards, um, that if it had any information about Allied forces, that could damage the war effort. So letters and postcards were censored, and the Field Service postcard with restrictive text that was introduced, and that could pass without censorship. Um, Initially, it had a pre-printed stamp, but then they did away with the stamp because it was all free. And so it had a very limited narration on the back. The soldier was supposed to cross out anything that didn't apply. And they weren't supposed to write anything on there, but this particular postcard, it has Merry Christmas written on it, so I guess they let that pass. But if you wrote anything extra, it wasn't going to get posted. And they were given 2 of these a week to send home. They were encouraged to use those. And in times of heavy fighting, the post office would prioritize getting those delivered. And at the peak, the Army Postal Service was handling as many as 12 million outward bound letters and 1 million parcels every week. So they were handling a lot of mail. And of course, the U.S. entered the war later, but the U.S. soldiers' mail was also censored. So we see on the back that their soldier mail, it's written soldier's mail, so they didn't need a stamp. It was also free. And then you can see the censor mark on the back of this postcard. And so all that mail had to be delivered somehow, and the men were off fighting. And so women were working on the home front to do a lot of the jobs that the men were not there to do. And so postcards showing women working on the home front, those started to be getting produced, and they were very popular. The one on the left, of course, that's showing the ladies who bring the letters to our houses and the tram conductor. And then on the right, we actually have some British women who are painting identification marks on the airplane wings. And so these postcards were very popular, and they were celebrating the contributions that the women were making for the war effort. And this, um, as you can see here, showing a lot of different jobs that the women were doing, working in munitions, delivering the mail, Red Cross nurse, tram, and then the women who are working on the farms. And they were all doing their little bit. And so these postcards started to replace the negative anti-suffrage imagery that had been popular prior to the war, because a lot of countries, particularly the US and the UK, the women had been fighting for the right to vote. And of course, there was a backlash against that. And so a lot of women were portrayed very negatively in postcards. And so now there were postcards, even ones that were still mocking women for working, because of course there was still kind of this idea that the woman's sphere was in the home and that they shouldn't be working. But even ones that mocked them, they were a little gentler. They weren't showing them as ugly, masculine women, harpies and hags. And a lot of these postcards actually had some, playful sexual innuendo in the postcard. And so, away from the front lines, it was actually possible to buy postcards. And this postcard is an example of that. It shows a female shop owner, and she's showing postcards to some French soldiers, and they were affectionately referred to as poilus. So here's a woman, and she's got her shop, and she has postcards for sale. And so actually, postcard shops were plentiful behind enemy lines. Here's another card. This shows Saint Nazaire, which was a troop transport town. And what I like about it is that these look to me, those look like American uniforms. So we have some American soldiers looking at the postcards. And then up the street, we have some sailors. So it was a big troop transport town. And so another type of postcard, or how postcards were helpful in the war, was what we would call the pinup. And here's a quote from a veteran of that war. Sit on the damp walls of the dugouts. There were wartime pinups that brought a moment of relief from the rat-infested, mud-filled holes of no man's land. And so, of course, prior to the war, we had a lot of illustrators that were, they were making beautiful images of women. We had Alphonse Mucha, and these are Raphael Kirchner. I've chosen some, tamer versions of pinup postcards here, but there are a lot of postcards that were produced of lovely women, and that's actually how we got the phrase pinup, because they were literally pinned up on the walls of the trenches to, like this veteran said, give a moment of relief to the soldier. And so another illustrator, very prolific illustrator at the time, was Xavier Sager. And this series is called Les Obus Pacifiques, the Peaceful Shells. And so, it's a very kind of suggestive, erotic series of postcards with the ladies writing on the bombshells. But this got me wondering if maybe that might have been the way we got the term bombshell to refer to a beautiful lady. It's possible, I guess. And so a little less naughty, shall we say, were some beautiful postcards. I love this series. It's called Our Allies in French, and they were printed in Paris. And this timing was at the very end of the Art Nouveau style of artwork, and Art Nouveau took its inspiration from nature. And so you do see a lot of combination of nature and people. They anthropomorphize, animals. And so here we have the allies, our allies, depicted as beautiful women that are also butterflies. And so their wings are the flags of the different countries that they're representing, the flags and the symbols on those flags. And so I think I have all of them at the time that were printed, of the allies that were in the war at that point. And what I find interesting about this particular set is not only do they have the beautiful women as butterflies of the countries, then they have the foe, um, the Central Powers. They have their leaders as insects and nasty wasps and whatnot, and then they have swords through them. So that is rather unique. And so another type of interesting postcard that was very popular that I collect are the embroidered cards. And they were very popular with the soldiers. Their popularity actually peaked during the war, and they were much more expensive than a regular postcard. Um, and they, had all the regular sentiments on there. And the embroidered postcards were first made in 1900 for the Paris Exposition, and they were machine embroidered on silk, then glued to a postcard with an embossed frame. So on the left, I have a postcard there of that Exposition Universelle de Paris 1900. And this is the Palais de Fils et Tissu, threads and fabric. And so I wasn't able to confirm this, but I thought, well, there might be a very good possibility that they were at least selling these postcards at that palais, if not, actually showing how they were being manufactured. It's possible. And so, but the demand for the embroidered postcards became so high that companies began to employ women to hand embroider the postcards. And they were embroidered by French women in their homes and sent to the factories for cutting and mounting into postcards. And so I have this postcard because I collect women's social history and I collect cards showing women at work. So there's, nothing to show for sure that these women were embroidering these particular postcards. But I just thought it was interesting that these women were all gathered and embroidering together. And I just thought how great it was that this was a way for, women. It was literally a cottage industry and a way for the women to make a living during the war. And so popular themes, the flags of the Allied forces, and also the year of the the year of the war, those were popular themes. And they would have been very fragile to send in the post on their own, and so they were often sent included in a letter to protect them. And there's variation on them. Some postcards were created as little envelopes that if you could lift the flap up and there was a little card inserted with a message. And others had handkerchiefs enclosed. You could open up the card, and then it actually turned into a souvenir that was a functional souvenir. And so another type of unique card that was popular were woven silk cards, and those were first produced in Germany in 1898, and they were woven on machines, and they were of very high quality. They could show, obviously quite a bit of detail, more detail than the embroidered cards. And so early popular themes were things like royals. But then when the war came along, they started to have more war-related themes, obviously. And there is a set of cards. There's apparently 66 of them. They're called the Silk Flames. They were produced by a French company, Idefrine, in Paris, and they were designed to be sold to the Allies. And they actually depict devastation. They depict the cathedrals being bombed and government buildings. And I think there's a lot of poignancy to that because they're, actually quite beautiful in a way, but they're showing the destruction of the towns. And so I have managed to find a few of them, but I'm always on the lookout for more. This one here on the left, it's another Silk Flames postcard showing the devastation of the cathedral in Rheims. And so I wanted to just take the Cathedral of Rheims to show how there were many cards produced of the devastation that was happening during the war. And so we have the Silk Flames, but then on the right, we've got more of a photographic type card showing the cathedral. And then here on the left, we have basically the same image. One's in black and white, and then the other, of course, has been colorized. In the middle, I've got showing a card, and I showed one that's not the greatest real photo postcard. I'm showing that on purpose because you will get some variation in quality of postcards at this time. And this one, obviously, it's showing a little bit of uh, the negative, the space between the different negatives on the roll, and so it really wasn't mounted on the postcard very well. On the right, of course, is basically an artistic rendering of the cathedral in flames, and that is a Croix Rouge Français, so a French Red Cross postcard. These are two cards from a series. I don't have the full series, so I don't know how many are in the series, but they devoted a whole series to the destruction of the Rheims Cathedral. So that shows you how, how the destruction was getting chronicled and how much it meant to people that, these things that were happening and they were getting printed in postcards. So This shows what war does. This next postcard is a real photo postcard. This was Dimou, France. The soldier writes on the back, this shows what war does. Not a house in the whole city that was not destroyed by shell fire. And so there are a lot of postcards. I'm not going to show a ton of postcards about destruction, but just to say that there were many that were produced. And actually, this was a way of chronicling, this is part of history. This shows us what was happening during the war, the result. And so another type of postcard that was produced was by news agencies, and they printed a lot of postcards. These two are from the Chicago Daily News, and they had photographers that were with the soldiers. So you're getting some, right in the action type postcards. And oftentimes this is where the soldier got information, but also, the other people got information about the progress of the war. And I just want to mention on the right, that postcard says chow time. And what I read about mail and so forth was that mail was often delivered at mealtime. And you can see in the forefront, those soldiers are looking at their mail. And I read that didn't matter how hungry the soldiers were, they always read their mail first. So that, that told you how important it was for them to be hearing from the people back home. And then the Daily Mail, that was one of the large newspapers in the UK, and they produced many postcards from their own photographers at the front as well as official government ones. So they had their own photographers out there. And I just wanted to print the back because on the left top of the back, it says passed by censor. So not only were the cards, after the soldier wrote something, were those looked at and potentially censored, all the cards that were produced had to go through a censor to make sure, they weren't showing something that in some way might be, giving an advantage to the other side. This real photo postcard is very, very haunting to me, and it shows the new weapons of war that were being employed, and specifically chemical warfare. And so you can see not only does the soldier have to wear a gas mask, but they've got something on the horse because obviously these chemical warfare, that's going to kill any living thing, a breathing thing. And, that's people's livestock. That's the horses that they need and use in the war effort. Another type of postcard that I collect, and I collect it because of my interest in women's social history, are Red Cross postcards because a lot of those were produced. They show nurses tending to the wounded soldiers. So there's some examples of that. And the American Red Cross, they produce postcards, using a lot of real photos of workers in the canteens and the women providing aid to the soldiers. These postcards, I'm sure, they help to keep people engaged and, sympathetic to the soldier, sympathetic to the war effort, and also selling them, I'm sure, was a way to fundraise to support the effort in terms of the costs. And the Salvation Army workers were also providing supportive services, and there are some postcards that are been printed up about that. On the left, it's showing a lady handing out donuts. That's kind of funny because it seems like there were a lot of postcards that showing the soldiers getting donuts. So the donuts must have been a big thing. And then on the right, there's a woman, and she's mending the uniform of the soldier. So one of my very favorite types of postcards, especially concerning the war, are propaganda and political messaging postcards. Some of them you look at them and you think, okay, I can figure out what's going on. This is the March to Paris, 1914. We got the big, strong boot, and we can figure out that these are German soldiers because they're depicted as little, fat soldiers, and they've got the little spike on the top of the helmet. But we know, if we know from history that this is saying, oh, it's going to be easy to defeat those Germans. And early on, people thought that. They thought, oh, the war's going to be over before Christmas. But in retrospect, of course, we know that they were not so easily defeated. You kind of need to have an understanding of the war to interpret a lot of these propaganda postcards. One series that I do like is this Tux series. There's about 6 of them, Aesop's Fables up to date. What I like about it is they explain the initial fable and then they tell you how it applies to the war. And so this one is the little dog that has a piece of meat. He sees his reflection, thinks it's another dog, and he wants that other dog's piece of meat, and he ends up, losing everything. And so it's saying, well, that's Germany. They lost their prosperity in order to try to obtain the mastery of the world. To understand just a little bit about the war so we can interpret the postcards, the most immediate cause of World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo. I include the postcard that shows her as well as the family because I thought that was particularly extreme to also assassinate her, particularly because they had a young family. But at any rate, there are some postcards of his actual visit at the time when he was assassinated. And he was the heir to the Austro Hungarian throne, and he wanted to incorporate Bosnia under Austrian rule. So he was attacked by Serbian nationals who didn't like that idea. Kabrinovic, one of the Serbian nationals, this postcard was actually, they were able to get some photos of him when he was being apprehended because he had thrown a grenade at the Archduke's card, but it had missed him. But unfortunately, later on, Gavrilo Princip, he was able to shoot the Archduke and Duchess. They both died of their injuries. And this is just a card that I found that was part of a series of cards about notorious people. This assassination, that was a plan by Serbia's military intelligence to destabilize the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That triggered a domino effect that led to a lot of the European powers being at war in just a few weeks. So this postcard that shows you kind of a map of the countries at that time. A system of opposing allies that had been developed over previous 35 years. That was the primary reason many countries went to war. This postcard, that shows a lot of different expressions on the faces. And so if you had an intimate understanding of all the countries' grievances and alliances, you could, figure out what those expressions mean. And here's another anthropomorphized postcard. International tensions had been mounting, but previous crises had been avoided. But this assassination that stoked all these old tensions. And so, the crisis spread, and then they pledged support for either Austria or Serbia. It just gets a little crazy. Austria, Hungary, of course, they declare war on Serbia, but Russia is an ally of Serbia. So they support Serbia against Austria Hungary. Germany's an ally of Austria. They declare war on Russia. And then France pledges to protect Russia against Germany and Austria. And then Germany declares war on France. So this postcard, kind of shows how it is. Everybody's, got an alliance. Everybody's mad at somebody else. And then here's a postcard. The decisions for war were made in a context of growing nationalism, increased militarism, imperial rivalry, and competition for power and influence. And this German postcard says, well, what we have, we keep. So we end up with two sides. The countries formed these opposing coalitions, the Allies, included France, Britain, Russia, Serbia, Belgium, and then the Central powers were Germany, Austria, Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. There were countries that wanted to stay neutral initially. Italy was one of those. but there was strong nationalist sentiment to push for war. And so you'll get a lot of postcards that are trying to, persuade people one way or another. This one, of course, is against the imperial nature of Germany, and the woman is giving a sign language that I think most of us can recognize. Switzerland declared neutrality in 1914, and that became a huge battleground for propaganda. And so this postcard obviously is trying to, persuade them that no, Germany, they're not going to be satisfied. They're a hoarder. They want it all. And so then we turn to ones that are, basically just your general patriotic postcards. Those included the flags of all the allies, showing this united front against the opposition. And then the flags change as more countries enter the fight. And so on the right, of course, the US entered much later. And then we finally start to see the American flag and the eagle in the patriotic postcards. And so other allegorical postcards that I find interesting, the leaders of the Central Powers, they were often depicted in these propaganda postcards. Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm and the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph are depicted in the left, and then those two are on the right, along with the Turkish leader Sultan Mahmud V is in the postcard on the right. And you can probably recognize the allegory on the postcard on the left. That's like Daedalus and Icarus flying too high, and they're close to the sun, and their wax wings starting to melt. And so Germany was often shown to represent the lone aggressor against the many allies. And the main reason for this was Germany was the big power. They had the big military, they were the big, strong threat. Often postcards, they personified, they used Kaiser Wilhelm to represent Germany. And so, they would show him in caricature. So I have this real photo postcard, showing what he looks like in real life. You'll notice something strange going on with his left arm. And he actually did have a disfigured left arm. It was kind of contracted, paralyzed. So you'll often see him holding like some gloves to camouflage that disfigurement. So then on the right, you'll see, his mustache is very exaggerated with the turning up on the ends. And then you'll know it's the German leader with the spiky pointed helmet. This arm is often featured. This is Wilhelm with Marianne, who represents France. And it says, "What are you thinking, my dear? Your arm is too short." And so his left arm had been injured at birth, and that explains why his arm is often mentioned in several postcards. And it looks very claw-like and not very human. And in here, actually, they make the arm look very long, and it says, "Be careful, you'll burn your hand." So he's trying to take control of the whole world. And this one, the Allies are putting the squeeze on him. We see him with his very exaggerated mustache. And then, of course, his hand is like some type of an animal claw with long fingernails. And then the US Congress voted to declare war on Germany in 1917. And so many anti German propaganda postcards were produced. And of course, Uncle Sam was frequently featured. And in those postcards, of course, it's showing Uncle Sam very strong and the Kaiser very weak, and showing him being able to handle him very easily. And of course, these were, to get support behind the war, get people's patriotic feelings stirred. So now we move on to Germany. And here's a Hold to Light postcard showing the Germans entering Brussels. And their war plan was to defeat France first, then concentrate on Russia. But that meant they had to invade Belgium to get to France. But this was in violation of Belgium's neutrality, and that had been guaranteed by a treaty signed in 1839 by all the major European powers, including Britain. And here are a couple postcards, showing them invading Belgium. Yeah, it wasn't too hard. They were supposed to be a neutral country, and this positioned them as a belligerent aggressor. And that put Britain in a sticky situation. That meant intervention on their part. That was a moral issue because it was about the rights of small nations. So there was a discussion between the British ambassador and the German imperial chancellor, Britain explaining, well, we signed this treaty, and the German chancellor said, well, why would you make war based on a little scrap of paper? And the ambassador replied, because England, they signed it, Germany signed it as well, and that was the Treaty of London. That Treaty of London, it was signed by the major European powers, and it guaranteed independence and neutrality of Belgium. And it was one of the early attempts at international law. So people were not obviously too pleased. And this postcard kind of shows that Germany was so willing to just pretend like that didn't mean anything. And so here's another postcard. This one's in French. Was a treaty merely a scrap of paper, as the chancellor claims? Well, Britain felt it had an obligation to defend Belgium against this invasion. And so this prompted the production of many postcards meant to be critical of Germany because, they had to get people to get behind the idea that Britain had to help Belgium. And little scrap of paper in French is petit chiffon de papier. So countless postcards were produced. This one celebrates the alliance and excoriates the German attitude about treaties. And it says, for a little scrap of paper, countless thousands fought and died to prove the Allies' honor was their glory and their pride, whilst the gallant, fearless navies have swept clear the mighty sea of those foes who were a menace to their peace and liberty. This on the back, they go into quite a detailed explanation about this scrap of paper uh, utterance, and explain why they're going to war. And here's a variation of that same sentiment, and with the Allied flags. Here's an allegorical example, the bulldog representing Great Britain. And of course, they're standing firm on the treaty, and it's got the scrap of paper phrase on it. So the violation of their treaty that was used for recruitment purposes, help keep your country's honor bright by restoring Belgium her liberty. So these two cards are showing people looking to get people to enlist, and they were also printed in French. And so these French postcards, they are showing their replications of the actual treaty, the signatures, their seals on there. This was a serious document. And so this postcard here starts to look at, well, if we're going to say that treaty's a scrap of paper, what about the Treaty of Frankfurt? And of course, that treaty ended the Franco-Prussian War, and that had very harsh terms for France. They surrendered Alsace and part of Lorraine, and they had a 5 billion franc indemnity. If we're going to just start saying that treaties are scraps of paper, well, let's look at these other scraps of paper. And so these are just two more examples of using that phrase, chiffon de papier, scrap of paper, in postcards, to trying to drum up opposition to Germany. Even Americans got in the act, and they were saying, well, Germans don't mind a scrap of paper, but I like a scrap of paper when it comes from you, obviously some mail. And letters and postcards, they were scraps of paper, literally, but obviously were more important than that to the sender and receiver. So there's repetition of this phrase, scrap of paper. It's showing up in a lot of different postcards. And particularly when we're talking about mail, well, mail is very dear to people. Whoops. And so here's a funny one. A scrap of paper. Well, the Germans, say, "Oh yeah, throw it in the wastebasket. It's no good. It's a scrap of paper." Well, he's holding a 10 franc note. He says, "Yeah, well, you can just put that in my pocket." This one, another humor card. She's had a little accident with her bathing suit, and a scrap of paper saved her from disgrace. They're making humorous cards, but this phrase is now pretty widely understood, uh, what the reference is meant. And then if we need a little scatological humor, and we have someone who is in colossal need. He needs to go to the bathroom urgently, and he asks for a scrap of paper. He says, "Oh, well, I only have the Neutrality Treaty of Belgium." "Oh, well, that'll do. Give it to me." That's what the Germans think of it. And so finally, the armistice is signed on November 11th, 1918. That ends the actual fighting, but it takes 6 more months of Allied negotiations at the Paris Peace Conference to finalize the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. And so this is a centenary postcard from 2019, shows the leaders of the big four countries that were, involved in this big peace conference, including Woodrow Wilson of the United States. There were a lot of postcards that were produced when Woodrow Wilson came to Paris for the peace conference. These are just two that I have. So it was a very big deal. You can see the huge crowd there on the right. And here's another centenary postcard. And the Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28th, 1919, that brought an end finally to the war. It forced the Germans to accept full responsibility for the war and its damages, leading to the imposition of substantial reparations, reduction in the size of the army, and concede more than 13% of its European domain. But here's another one of those updated Aesop's fables. Public sentiment in France demanded punishment and retribution. The harsh conditions imposed, they were meant to prevent Germany from reemerging as a military and economic power. So this Aesop fable we're familiar with. It's the farmer who killed the goose that laid the golden eggs. They felt that was Germany. They brought it upon themselves because of their greed. By the war's end, new technology was eclipsing the postcard. People were inundated with images in newspapers and magazines and the cinema. And there was the telephone, radio, greater use of the telegraph, and cost of a postcard production. That rose and the quality declined. Postcard sending habit died out with the end of the First War. Postcard collecting hobby also ended, and people were no longer buying postcards to save an album. So the golden age of the postcard, had come to an end, but not before it had played a very important role in World War One. And that is the end of my program.
Oh, oh, thank you, Lauren. That was fabulous. Really terrific, for sure.
Thanks.
Lauren, that was fabulous. You have a tremendous collection. I have a very similar collection, but not near so many quality cards that you have. I have a great many German cards, having lived over there. I wanted to say that I have a lot of amateur photograph postcards from the First World War, and I'm very distressed that after 100 years, the pictures are very well faded. They're starting to fade out, and I'm losing a lot of my old World War I cards from that source.
Oh, that's sad.
That's very sad, and they've not been exposed to light. I don't know what, they just were inferior.
Yeah.
I like you had one hold to light card and showing the Belgium damage, and it's a German card. I have a series of those hold to lights. When Germany attacked Belgium, they of course won quite quickly, and they showed a whole series of hold to light cards showing the different Belgian cities in flames. Quite a remarkable collection that I have.
I bet.
You know, And I also like that Raphael Kirchner card you showed. I thought that was a fine. He's a
Yes.
postcard producer. I have a lot of the embroidered cards too. Those are just fabulous. As you said, with little messages and cardboards inside of the embroider.
Yes, I love those.
Those are very special to collect.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
This is Jim Potter from Hutchinson, Kansas. I'm not sure if anybody can see the image that I put in the chat, but I can tell you about the card if you can't see it.
Go ahead and tell us.
Okay, so this is a World War I card, and it's titled "Bolster the Line with Liberty Bonds." And on this side, it shows a whole bunch of munitions. It's just, well, it's not in focus, but anyways, it shows a bunch of ammo, and it says, "We shoot this many shells at the Huns every few seconds. Liberty Bonds will buy more."
Mhm.
But most important, I wanted to share the message side. This was dated 11/11/18. This corporal says, "My dear lady, I am sending a personal announcement of the great victory of the Allies. The armistice was signed this morning at 5 o'clock. France is drunk with joy. The American boy is the victor of a deluge of hugs and kisses." Oh, from France. Yeah. And then sending my regards.
Oh, wonderful.
That's
And
awesome.
yes, it's a soldier's mail free.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
actually, I think I have that card, but the message that you have on the back is tremendous. I bought an album that a soldier, he sent a lot of postcards to his then girlfriend, later ended up being his wife. And I was I was hoping that there would be, messages like that on the back. Of course, I bought that after I produced this program, so I don't have a lot of
Okay.
those cards in it. But unfortunately, a lot of them just said things like, "Here's another one for your postcard collection."
Well, Lauren, I sent the images to you on your Facebook account, and Hal, I sent an email image to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren, for an exceptional talk, actually. It was really
Yeah.
super interesting. I have
Thank
two
you.
questions. One is, why did embroidered cards take off in World War One? Was there any reason for that that you can sort of point to? And my second question is, why did postcards' popularity decline after World War One? Were they so associated with the war? I just wondered if there was anything more about that interplay that strikes you.
I just think, it just got easier for, I mean, there was already, the reasons that it was starting to decline before, but then you have all these people overseas and, they've got to stay in touch. I think just other things took over, telephone, probably, and radio, and
And,
I'm not, yeah,
and the quality got much worse.
quality. Yeah, that
And
really
what
kind of did it in when they had those tariffs where they were trying to discourage the cards being made in Germany. They wanted them,
Yeah.
made in the
That's why
US.
the
Well, they
cards
just
of the
didn't.
1920s are really quite inferior, most of them.
Yeah,
and what about the embroidered cards? Why
I don't,
during
you know,
you don't know?
I
No
don't
idea.
know.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know. They're,
I
I
think they
guess
were just
maybe,
pretty.
yeah,
Yeah, there was like a breath of fresh air to send to a wife or a girlfriend or mother or something. It's, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Somebody else? Oh, I love all this. Go ahead, please, Cindy. You're on.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
I
you go.
just wanted to share one World War One postcard that I think is interesting. I don't know. This is the Right Honorable Winston Churchill.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And it describes him at the bottom of the picture on the front. It says, men of the moment. And I think that's just so fascinating considering the role then that he played in World War II, that he was considered a man of the moment for World War One. And he
Well,
looked so cute and so young.
I think he was also kind of instrumental in the Boer Wars too, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
but horribly in Gallipoli.
yeah,
They're in Turkey, so that was kind of a low point. But
yeah.
he was able to come back and rev up the country during World War II for sure.
Well, you were mentioning the armistice, and I don't know if you've ever seen cards of the false armistice. We have a few in Canada. What happened was, I think on the 8th, the United Press in Paris thought that the war was over, and they sent a wire story across, the world saying that, and the newspapers picked it up, and of course they were all very eager to be the first. So this went out in a lot of newspapers on, I think it was the 8th, and some postcards were made of the celebrations because people rushed out into the streets.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah, a
those would
few days
be,
early, but it
yeah,
was a bit too early. Those are kind of neat.
yeah,
Now you say 8th instead of the 11th?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knew the war was going to end. Like it
Yeah,
was being negotiated. And I guess the United Press somehow got word incorrectly that it had been agreed, and so it got sent out. And all the newspapers in North America already had their war is over special editions all pre-printed, their inserts. And so they were all ready to send those out, and they did that.
ah.
A bit
wow,
too early.
wow.
Oops.
No, the
That's fine.
program was absolutely wonderful and educational.
Thank
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Lauren. Great talk. Very, very educational.
Thank
There was a
you.
lot there to unpack. I'd have to watch it again.
There was a lot
That's
to
great.
pack in there.
But I have a couple, maybe three of those standard issue postcards, the brown ones with all the script that's already there that you circle and things. And I've always thought those were really cool. And when I've shown those people to people in the past, a lot of people haven't seen those, and it's pretty interesting. But I know they're probably common, but I was showing people recently, and they thought those were really interesting. But yeah, I see you have them, so that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
I think a lot of times with the postcards, it was just getting something that said they're still alive, they're okay. It kind of they didn't need a whole lot more than that, anything extra, of course, but it was just that little bit of relief you could go on, with life, knowing at least for now they were okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I do have one card in my collection. It's Fatherless Children of France.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I really want to thank you for the presentation. It was really great, and it gave me a real structure to think about all the cards that I have. When I go, like I bought these, but as lots of cards, but I haven't really sorted through them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I also have photographs and stereo view cards.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I
Wonderful.
wanted to say that the British propaganda against the Germans was equally reciprocated by the Germans, who made all kinds of comic cards about the bulldog in England and so on.
Yes.
They both were going in both directions, that propaganda.
Yeah.
Sure, sure.
It ties in into what the postcards that two lovers exchanged in World War One in Italy, that I made a talk some probably a year ago or more, and that I have the two collections, about 500 postcards that they exchanged, and somehow I have both sides, which was unusual. So
That's right.
and that was fun. So the postcard that they cover, a lot of them were military postcards.
Yeah.
And weren't they from your family, Clarissa?
No, that had nothing to do with my family.
Okay,
I
okay.
just found them by chance 20 years ago on a Baltimore show a box of postcards from Italy, and I realized they were all sent to the same address.
Oh,
I bought the whole box.
oh, wonderful.
And I sorted them out and read the messages, and so I was able to kind of reconstruct the story, because Italy war was different because they stayed in within Italy. They wanted just to get a couple of region on the north of Italy.
No, I thought that was a wonderful presentation, a wonderful collection, a lot of different themes, and it was done very well. Thank you. And thank you, Hal and Alan, for co-hosting a meeting with your club and the San Jose Club. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, it's been fun. It really has. Thank you.
I don't have any World War One cards. The only thing I happened to pick up on occasion was some Red Cross canteen cards and Red Cross training cards for training people how to move injured people and so
Sure.
forth. The only other thing I have collected towards World War One is I had an uncle who was a ammunitions carrier for a regiment out of Pennsylvania, and was gassed, not as bad as everybody, but was gassed in France during the war. And he came back and then went to work for, it was either General Electric or Westinghouse, can't remember which, out near Pittsburgh. And I don't remember him really clear in my mind. That was a long time ago, and I was a lot younger, but that's all I have for collection towards World War One.
I just thought it was a great presentation, and yeah, the scrap of paper information was really great. And then the Archduke's mustache, I think, is excellent. So I got a picture of that.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so I like that. And so thank you very much. And
Sure.
Yes, I think it was an excellent presentation, and I very much appreciate it. I collect a World War One real soldier studio postcards, and I really like the Red Cross ones that you showed, and it gave me a better idea about how I can better rearrange my collection of cards. So thanks very much. Great presentation.
Well, thank you.
Terrific.
The Wichita Club meeting, there was a woman there that wanted to know about a specific artist that did World War One postcards, and she put it in the chat. I wrote it down on, now I can't find it.
Well, it's Cindy. She's here this evening.
Oh, so did you get it asked then, your question?
I did find my cards. You had asked to see them, and I had misremembered them. They are all World War One Christmas cards, but they are not postcards.
Okay. Greeting cards then.
Yes, like several of them are. This one is to Kaiser Bill, a Christmas epitaph. Here's hoping, here lies Kaiser Bill. He stood under the mistletoe and was kissed by an American machine gun. So I have seven World War One Christmas cards, all done by Ernest Dudley Chase, but they are not postcards. So I did misremember that detail.
But it sounds neat. That's fun. I have a collection of, naturally, of greeting cards too. I can't stand it. I'm just so pleased that so many of you showed up, and it's a tribute to Lauren and what she has, and able to express it so well and show and display. And we're lucky to know her and to have her here this evening for the San Jose and Wichita Postcard Club meeting.